we will start with roll call.
Barbara Stackhausen,
Here.
Dick Bonin,
Here.
Ken Killian,
Here.
Eileen Nichols,
Here.
Patrice Steiner,
Here.
Mike Den,
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Yes. Here.
All right, the first item is supposed to be our public hearing, but I do not see the individual. You're going to take it?
Sure.
All right, well, good, we have a new speaker for the public hearing. So, staff presentation for the Community Development Block Grant application for the library block redevelopment.
Yes, what you have in your packet is a draft grant application to apply for $500,000 of community development block grant funding. The proposal is to help facilitate the library block redevelopment project. And we say library block because it is, quite frankly, the entire block. About a year ago, a developer had come into town and had received options to purchase on all of the properties within that block. And those options have since expired, but that started a conversation as to whether or not it was feasible to redevelop the entire block into a profitable development for the community. And what role the library should or shouldn't play as part of that. The city hired Cindy Yagi of Economic Development Partners, and she did a feasibility study partially funded by grant money to determine what the feasibility of that development was. That feasibility study has been completed and submitted to the state of Wisconsin. And by doing that feasibility study, we have completed the first step toward receiving a much larger grant. So the next step, of course, is to apply for the larger grant, the $500,000, and that money would be used, if received, for the clearance of these buildings and properties to clear the site and prep it for development. It is anticipated that although the city would receive the grant, we would encourage a developer to do all of the work necessary, assembling the property, actually doing the demolition, and going forward. So I have a little agenda that the state of Wisconsin requires me to go through for this type of public hearing. It should only take a minute, but it is required that we make certain things available and notice to the public. I have to do an identification of the total potential funding. This grant would be the blight or the clearing of the buildings. It'd be $500,000 grant, and then the city is required to match that. And I believe the library has a building fund that could be used to provide portion of that match. The anticipation is that after the buildings are cleared, we do have a developer who may be interested in building a $20 to $30 million facility on that location. We are at the early stages of discussions, and when it's appropriate, we will be bringing that to the city council. But we're still in the beginning stages. Eligible CDBG activities. We will be using this for the demolition of the existing properties if we receive the grant. I also have to go over the identified community development needs. And I did want to note that this was a need identified in the downtown development plan adopted in January of 2011, that the library block had potential for redevelopment. The activities proposed for the CDBG application, including the potential residential displacement. We don't anticipate the displacement of very many people. Most of those properties are rental units for student housing. I believe there is a single-family owner on that block, and that property would be voluntarily sold. There is no need for the city to step in with any type of eminent domain or anything. This is all completely by the developer, and it's entirely up to them to assemble the property. At this point, I need to open it up for citizen input regarding this project or any other community development block grant project existing in the city. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is public statements in favor. And I would note that we do have a letter, from the library board. They did discuss the proposed community development block grant, public facilities grant, and they are in support of the project and voted to accept the grant pending public input, review by the Common Council, and the acquisition of signatures from city officials. So the library board has reviewed this and is in favor of going forward. And we have a couple of library board members in the audience tonight. Are there any other public statements in favor? Any public statements against? Public statements in general? Council discussion.
I have one question, page 3, and it's underneath the 3 eligibility, 2, and what categories or objectives are we using as far as meeting the federal rules? There are 3 federal rules. We must meet one of those. Benefit low and moderate income persons. 2, prevent or eliminate slums or blight. Or 3, meeting an urgent local need. So which ones are we using?
The reference, I think, is number 2. We would be removing blighted area. Blight is a very general term. A property could be deemed blighted because the lot is too small. A property could be deemed blighted because it doesn't have proper lighting, or a street light isn't lit on the block. So under the state statutes, the definition of blighted is very general. And the city of Platteville created TIF District number 7 several years ago. And as part of that has a redevelopment district that the redevelopment authority put into place. This block is in part of the redevelopment district. And for the redevelopment district to be formed, a majority of the property has to be deemed blighted. And so this block does meet that definition under the state law for CDBG funding.
Do you have a rough idea what the tax base will be when we're completed? Ballpark?
I believe the development will be somewhere between 20 and 30 million. I do not know what the taxes would be on that off the cuff.
My next question is on page 4. So it's item 3, bullet point 2, second one. And it says we're supposed to meet this one as among about a half a dozen, promoting improved housing and economic opportunities for low and moderate income households.
The grant application, if you read the sentence above it, the proposed project must be consistent with the state's CDBG program goals for 2013, which are included in the annual action plan and include, and you're reading one of those bullets. At this point, these are some of the things that we believe that this project could help with. At this point, the residential component has not been narrowed down specifically. It's very close to the university, and I believe university students would qualify under low to moderate income households. But at this point, I don't think we're at a place where we're prepared to say for sure one way or the other what the residential component will be.
So in reading section 3, it says and include. So I think this is the first time we've gotten the whole document as far as writing a CDBG, whatever you call it.
Right. What you're reading are the instructions for actually filling out the grant.
Right, for filling it out, and that's why I'm bringing up the question.
Okay.
So some of these, I gather, interpreting this, some of these we might meet and some not. Is that correct?
It's entirely possible, yes.
We don't have to meet them all.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Larry, at this time, if this is a development project, okay, why would the city want to spend any money on this? That's what developers are for. We don't have the money for this at this point in time. I don't care if it's a great deal.
That's an excellent point. We are relying on the developer, whomever the developer ends up being, to do virtually everything on this block development. The city of Platteville gets involved because we want to use the TIF district revenue to help subsidize the development so that the city can get a new library facility. If the city taxpayers do not have to pay for a new library, I think that's a win for this community.
That's true, but we don't have to spend $500,000 to use our TIF district. The TIF district's already there. His development will be within that TIF district, so it's just there. We don't really need to come up, other than, we're talking, oh, we'll just do you a favor and give you $500,000 to help do this.
Well, I think the first half of your comments were accurate. We didn't have to do it. The second part, what we're trying to do is find a way to reduce the costs of building a new library. The lower the costs are for building the new library, the more feasible this project becomes. If we're doing a $10 million library project, then you have to have a lot larger tax base to support that. If you're doing a $5 million or a $2 million library, then the tax base has to be much smaller and the project becomes that much more likely to cash flow.
I understand that.
So
but
any grants that we can get is gonna help this project.
grant is one thing, but then the $500,000 that we're kicking in on the side, let the developer do it if he wants to develop that building and be part of, supposedly the library is supposed to be part of that building, correct?
Under the grant application, the city has to provide the match, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be able to get that back through some type of a development agreement. So when we write a development agreement with the developer, we would be able to try to find some way that that payment is restored to the city.
Because you remember how we discussed some of the budget already, and we're talking
Oh, yes.
about,
We are certainly having a challenging budget in 2014.
what's the cost for writing this grant?
It has been
Haven't
paid.
written.
It's already under contract. It was part of the feasibility study grant contract. So we contracted with Economic Development Partners to do, initially it was a small contract to apply for a grant to do the feasibility study.
Okay,
And then we got a $25,000 grant from the state and matched it with $25,000 out of the city's library building fund. And we had $50,000 for them to do the feasibility study and to write the next grant.
so that money is already out there, we don't have to get it now. We don't have to come up with that money, it's
That's
already
correct.
there.
It's committed and spent.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Any other discussion?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second. We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes,
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes,
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Eileen,
Yes.
I think you better mention again about the green paper.
Okay. So do we need a motion to accept the,
The actual resolution to do the grant is on information and discussion this evening.
so that
it'll-
completes our public hearing. For those of you who are in the audience and who wish to speak on a subject this evening, or if you have public comments from citizens, we do have these small green pieces of paper. They're over on the desk or the table over there as you came in, and we do ask that you fill that out and indicate which item you would like to speak on. So that concludes our public hearing, and as was noted in information and discussion, we will be talking about the resolution, which will be at our next meeting. Next item is consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Please indicate to the council president if you would prefer separate discussion and action. The first item is minutes from the July 23rd, 13 regular council meeting. B is payment of bills. C is financial report for July. D, appointments to boards and commissions. And this evening, I have placed in front of the council members the individuals that I have contacted to serve on a city hall task force. For the public's information, the Common Council had a work session recently to talk about this building, its uses, whether or not we wanted to remain in this building, if this was going to be our city facility, because in the past, there's been discussion about perhaps building a new city hall. This council unanimously said they wish to remain in this building. Knowing that, we also know that there are some deficiencies in this building and some empty spaces that perhaps could be utilized in some fashion. So I was asked to put together a task force to look at this building and then make recommendations to the council. So the task force members are Paul Budden, Jerry Zelke, Troy Majid, Cheryl Schmieder, Milt Rui, Kay Helker. Barb Stockhausen will be the council rep, and I will also sit in on some of the meetings as needed. We would invite public input on the building, and I haven't had a chance yet to talk to our communications director, but I'm sure we can set something up on the website where you can certainly make comments. You can also make comments to city council members and also to the members of this task force. So, in advance, I would like to thank these individuals for agreeing to serve on the task force. Licenses, we have a change of agent for Walgreens, a temporary Class B retailer's license for the Platteville J.C.'s for Platteville Dairy Days on September 6th through the 8th this year, and 1 or 2 year operators licenses for premises licensed to traffic in fermented malt beverages and intoxicating liquors. That information's in the packet. We also have some permit requests. One is for the Cassville Car Cruise Parade on August 31st, 2013. And you will note that there was information in the packet that this particular event had asked us to waive the fee, so we need to discuss whether or not the council wishes to waive that fee or include the fee. Platteville Dairy Days Parade on September 7th, a permit for that parade, and the University of Wisconsin Platteville's Homecoming Parade on October 5th, 2013. So as far as the Cassville Car Cruise Parade, if anyone would like to make a comment on that, whether or not they feel that the fee should be waived or included.
We've waived those in the past, correct?
We have waived it generally, at least from what I recall, Mike, and other people can certainly give input for local groups. This is, an organization that is not local, so that's
But
what the
they're
question
starting
is.
here in town, correct? They're cruise?
Start at Menards.
Correct. They're starting out at Menards, they're, meeting in the parking lot there and then going through town, down Business Highway 151 and then up Water Street.
And
Can-
I would think that we could bypass the charge.
Mm-hmm.
If they're gonna be here in town, they might spend some money.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay,
I would
well,
like to make a motion to approve the consideration of the consent calendar sections A through E, which is minutes through licenses. Since we're discussing permits and it'll take a different kind of motion, I think that approval of those 5 items, minutes, payment of bills, financial reports, appointments, and licenses, I make a motion, we approve those.
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a second to approve A through E. We'll vote.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes,
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, and now we have the question about the permits. Is there a motion on that portion?
The current proposal from city staff is to include a $25 charge, right? Recommend approve all 3 parade requests, waiving the fee for UW Platteville and the Dairy Days Committee.
That's
That's the
correct.
current.
That's the recommendation in our packet.
Say again? I'm sorry.
If you're looking at the consent calendar, parade permit, $25 application fee, under recommendation, it says recommend to approve all 3 parade requests, waiving the fee for UW Platteville and the Dairy Days Committee. So the Cassville Car Cruise Parade is not included in that waiver. If you want to include it, that would have to be in a motion. If you want to include the waiver,
yes, I do.
then we need a motion.
Okay, I move that we waive the fee for the Castle Car Cruise.
And for the other 2 as well.
Correct.
All right.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second, and we'll vote.
Stackhausen,
Yes?
Bonin,
Yes,
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
motion carries.
Citizens' comments, observations, and petitions. We have 2 individuals who have asked to speak. One has asked to speak on an item that we'll be discussing later because she cannot stay past this time. So Kathy Kopp would like to speak on the Museum Task Force report. And Amy Seaboth would speak on UW Platteville transportation update. So Kathy is first and then followed by Amy. If you would give your name and your address for our records, please.
Kathy Kopp, 415 North Second. Appreciate the opportunity to speak before, so that I can leave here, but I just want to make a comment about an action item that comes later in the agenda regarding the adopting at least the way I'm interpreting, adopting the recommendations of the museum task force. Couple of concerns with that. Number one, there seems to be a little bit of confusion, and some of the people I've talked to about whether or not the city council is accepting the report tonight or they're adopting the recommendations. One of the concerns with the recommendations is if in fact that's what the purpose is tonight as an action item, one of the recommendations is to raise the room tax by 1%. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't been discussed outside of the task force. I did check with Ron Hall with the Super 8 when I realized it was on for action, and he said, representing the lodging industry, no, they have not been contacted about that. And he said it was the first he heard of it. So I guess I would like to ask that the city council postpone an action on that, the proposal by the task force, so that we can have chance to have some further discussion. Also talk to Deb Jenny, who chairs the city's tourism committee, and that committee will be meeting Thursday, and that discussion has not taken place there either. So just ask for your consideration to postpone adopting the recommendations until we've had a chance to bring in some of the other groups to see what the implications may be. Thank you.
You want the one item or the whole all the recommendations?
I'm sorry.
Just the one item or all recommendations?
Well, I think I'm going to say number one would be that one, the one recommendation. But the other thing is that as the tourism entity, the museum is one of the things that we promote, and without having some discussion and really getting into how we're going to make a change and continue to make this work so it's still a viable entity is something that I would really appreciate us having an opportunity to talk about.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Seaboth, and I know many of you. I'm the new sustainability coordinator at UW Platteville. I started in November of last year. Part of my job is to manage transportation for the university. I understand that Christina Curis may have come before you quite a lot last year to talk about transportation and provide updates. So tonight I thought I would do the same. Our primary goal at the university right now, as you're aware, primary goal regarding transportation is to reduce the number of cars coming to campus. So I wanted to tell you about some of the initiatives we have. You're aware that we have the shuttle. Our figures from 2012, 2013 came in during the fall semester, the first semester of the shuttle. We had 9,000 rides. During the second semester, I was pretty excited to see that we actually had 26,000 rides. So there was an exponential increase in ridership between the first and second semester. Most of those rides are occurring at the 4th Street and Main stop, right downtown here, Roundtree Commons, and then on campus at the Student Center. Those are the top 3 stops. We do have stops throughout town, though, as you're aware. And in this year, we will be having some minor route changes. Primarily, the route around town is going to remain the same. We're going to do some limited hours out to Business 151. We're reducing that schedule because it wasn't a very popular route. And we're going to replace that instead with some more hours that go to the new Bridgeway Commons from the residence halls, because we're concerned that that's going to be quite a hike for students. So we're going to offer a bus ride during dinner hours Monday through Friday. Otherwise, I did also want to make you clear that the public can ride our shuttle. And it's a fixed route shuttle that runs around town from basically 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1. Nope. I don't have the hours on me. I didn't bring them. On Saturday, it runs most of the day as well. I think 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. So it's $30 a year for the public to purchase a pass, or $20 a semester. And I'm going to be working on figuring out if there's places around the community that could sell those passes as well, so they're more accessible. I was talking with Carolyn at the library to see if that's something the library might be able to provide as a service. And then a couple other updates. We have a new bus that will take students from campus to Chicago at academic breaks. So Thanksgiving, winter, and spring semester. And that's welcome. The public are welcome to use that as well. And it basically takes them to O'Hare and Rockford. And then at the end of the break, it brings them back from Rockford or O'Hare and then Rockford to Platteville. So far, that's been really well received. We started doing it at winter break last year. We just ordered a bunch of new bike racks. We're going to be installing those on campus in the next couple of weeks. And we put some striped lanes on campus too. That's all part of the initiative to make campus biker friendly, more friendly towards bikes. And finally, parking passes went on sale about 2 weeks ago. We don't have any numbers yet, I don't believe, on sales, but if that's something you folks would like to see, I can provide that to you. I think that's a good summary. Can I take questions? Okay.
Any questions?
Easy crowd. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Committee reports in your packet. The library board, I have no additional information. Museum board, Stockhausen.
I have no information right now.
Commission on Aging, Bonin.
No additional other than what's in the packet.
Plan Commission, Nichols and Den.
Nothing other than what's in the minutes.
Yep, same for me. Other reports included in the packet, the airport financial statement, water sewer revenue and expense report, city attorney itemized statement, department progress reports, and 2012 single audit report. Any questions on any of that information? All right, seeing none, we'll go right on to action items. First is ordinance 1315, establishing the Roundtree Gallery Board as part of the Platteville City Code. Larry?
Sure. As discussed at our last meeting, one of the things that I've taken on is trying to incorporate all of our boards and commissions into city ordinances. It's perhaps a more formal way of recognizing these bodies exist, as well as gives us an opportunity to review these bodies' missions. The Roundtree Gallery was the latest board to be considered, and the Roundtree Gallery Board voted to support this proposal and are bringing that forward today as a recommendation.
One quick question for you. What's the difference?
A resolution is not as formal as a city code. The city code is adopted and added to our municipal code book. Resolutions are filed in a binder in the safe. It's part of our permanent record, but it's not something that's readily available to the public year after year, whereas our city code is always updated on the web.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Motion to adopt ordinance 1315.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next is ordinance 1316, amending the official traffic map, stop sign at intersection of Lily and Pine. Howard.
Okay. We're recommending the following change. Install stop sign on Lily Street at the intersection of Pine Street behind the museum. With our recent Broadway reconstruction project, there's been a lot more traffic on those streets, and there have been reports of a number of near misses at that uncontrolled intersection. We've temporarily posted a stop sign, but a formal ordinance would give us legal authority to have a permanent sign in place.
Any questions?
I move to approve ordinance 13-16, amending the official traffic map, the stop sign at the intersection of Lily and Pine Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item C is ordinance 1317, creating section 36067, establishing an economic development grant for reserved Class B liquor licenses.
This was discussed at last month's,
Okay.
council meeting, and there was discussion about having the ordinance, revising it to include the existing restaurants, and clarifies that also that only $9,000 of that $10,000 fee will be placed in a reserve account. The other $1,000 will just go right into our license revenue account.
And the 9,000 would be held no longer than 13 months, it says in here.
Correct.
Okay.
Motion to adopt ordinance 1317.
Second. We have a motion and a second?
We allowed any more discussion on that?
Sure. If you have something to say?
Yes, when we started out with this, it was going to be to bring in revenue to the city with an economic block grant, where if we had a new business coming to town, we would have a liquor license available for them, and we would have incentive for them to have this block grant for bringing their new business here. Now, all of a sudden, it's back to anybody in town, if they want to throw some hammer and nail up and fix it and send you the receipts, then we're going to give it to them. I thought it was strictly for new, to propagate, to bring in the tax base, to increase things here in town. Now, all of a sudden, it's anybody.
No, that's not a change, Mike.
That's what I thought
It
when we
was
left the
from the
meeting.
get-go, when we first started talking about this with the restaurant on Main Street, was the one we already knew was interested for this,
I do know that part.
yeah,
Reserve license.
I do know that.
reserve
part.
license, yeah. Okay, now they are planning on doing the $10,000 deposit or fee. Therefore, that's gonna make them a tavern. They'll be able to sell regular, like the rest of the food places.
I also,
Their business is still gonna probably be 50%, has to be 50% or more as food.
are we gonna be able to govern that?
Always have been, the rest, you've got a lot of other ones around that way.
But whether they are or not, we need to know that.
We
We
do,
need to see their receipts, their businesses, at the end of the year to
you'll have
prove
to
that.
ask Jan that, I can't answer that.
Okay. Remember we talked about that, Jan, at the licensing committee meeting? We talked about if a person was going to get this block grant, that we needed to see their receipts of what they did, okay? And
Correct.
then, if it was required that 50% or more had to be food, we also had to see that at their year's end. Otherwise, how do we know? We don't have a clue.
We did discuss it, it's not listed in the ordinance, that we would look at their receipts, at the end of that year.
Because if you're gonna,
Is that something we can,
it'd be necessary if we're gonna put it in the ordinance that they have to have at least 50% of their business being food. Okay, if we're saying that, and that's part of the adoption of this thing, then we also have to have a way to understand and see that this is really true. I mean, what good does it do to say 50% if there's no control over it? Because it could be anything.
I understand
Anybody
you,
else?
yeah, I understand your point, Mike.
Okay.
I don't know whether or not you have to be licensed from the state differently if you're a restaurant versus a bar, let's say. So perhaps that information could be solved just simply by saying, you know, if they have a restaurant license. But I don't know for sure, so,
Go ahead with the vote.
It says in the ordinance, the grant fund shall not be distributed unless the licensed premises listed on the application is a restaurant, is operating and open to the public. All outstanding fees, including but not limited to fines, assessment, or taxes, are paid in full, and the licensee provides sufficient documentation and proof. If the license committee determines that the license is not in compliance with what's been set forth, the economic grant can be denied, shall be denied.
okay, so at the time that they apply for the grant, that would be the time that we
They
could
have
ask
to show
for
proof.
evidence that they are indeed a restaurant, correct?
Right.
The way I would understand the way the proposed ordinance is written.
Thank you, Barb.
Any other questions? We need a motion.
I did make.
There's a
I
motion
think
and a
there was
second.
a
I'm
motion.
sorry.
I jumped in with the discussion.
Forgot the motion was made. All right, we have a motion. We've had the discussion, and now we'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Goss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item D, Resolution 1330, making application for exemption from the levy of any county library tax. Larry, I think you spoke on this last time.
Sure. Annually, Grant County sets a special property tax levy for library services. Fund raised from that levy are distributed to communities to compensate them for library services by non-residents. So the Platteville Library receives funding from Grant County to help us pay for the service of non-residents. Basically, what we have is a resolution that would exempt the city of Platteville from paying the county library tax, because we are paying for the library tax for our residents through the municipal tax, your property tax levy in the municipality. It's an annual resolution that we approve to help our residents not have to pay the county tax.
Any questions?
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Goss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item E, Resolution 1331, supporting a partnership with the University of Wisconsin-Platteville for the development of an innovation center. Larry?
This resolution essentially lays out the relationship and how it would develop with the University of Wisconsin-Platteville for the grant application to go forward with an innovation center's construction. You can see the resolution in your packet. This resolution establishes the initial phase of the partnership with UW-Platteville. Together, we would be paying for a contract with regional planning to do a grant application to the EDA for the construction costs of the new innovation center proposal. The innovation center is expected to cost about $8 million, and this would provide, if awarded the grant, approximately $3 million.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. In terms of, I don't have a problem with supporting the partnership. My question is though, and I've read all of these materials, where does it say that the grant application would come to the council prior to its being submitted for approval?
I don't
In other
believe-
words, I'm very reluctant to approve anything that I don't have the ability to review. So I
Okay.
don't want this to be considered approval of a grant application.
I don't believe that's in the resolution, so it may take an amendment to the resolution. If anyone would like to change the resolution via their motion, you could certainly do that.
What's the cost for the grant? For
Uh,
writing the grant?
The contract with Regional Planning Commission is anticipated to be about $7,500, and actually, I believe that's the next agenda item. And this resolution would establish the relationship, and the city and the university would each pay approximately half, or $3,750.
Thank you.
So at this time, $3,750 is what the city council is being asked to commit to. Additional costs will be necessary before the grant can be submitted, but we don't know what those costs are at this point or whose burden they will be.
Once again, if we get this grant, who's coming up with the other 8 million?
It would be the other five, because it's eight
I'm
total.
sorry,
Yep.
5, total of 8, sorry, Larry.
To be honest, we haven't determined that at this point. Before any obligation on the city's behalf would occur, the city council would have to make that decision.
Question for you. Don't they usually have an idea where the rest of this stuff's coming from before they start running out and spending money to write grants for money and then not knowing where the rest of it's coming from, or who's gonna do it, or where they're gonna do it?
Well, yes, I mean, we have heard, perhaps about a year ago, the city council did hear a presentation And at that point, it was about 2.5 million from the city. Given our current financial position, I don't know that that's likely any longer. But that's all stuff that has to be discussed and worked out as part of this application. We also have to identify a site as part of this application and who's paying for the site. So we do have a few steps to go, and I guess this is just the first step.
Thank you.
Okay, I would propose language in Resolution 13-31. In the fourth whereas, it says, whereas the Platteville Common Council would like to partner with the University of Wisconsin-Platteville to pursue an Economic Development Administration grant to help support the development and creation of an innovation center in the city of Platteville. I would add after to pursue an economic development grant, I would add language in parentheses, grant to be approved by action of the city council prior to submission. So I don't know, is that an amendment
That-
to it?
That's an amendment
So
to the
I'm
resolution.
making a motion to amend the resolution with that language in that place.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion for resolution 1331 with the amendment.
Can you
That-
tell me again where the amendment's gonna fit in?
Okay, it's gonna go in the fourth whereas, so it goes down, whereas the Platteville Common Council would like to partner with the University of Wisconsin-Platteville to pursue an economic development grant. And then I would put parenthetically, grant to be approved by action of the city council prior to submission. And in parentheses, to help support the development and creation of an innovation center in the city of Platteville.
Thank you.
This
My-
would then
my question
ensure that
is-
that the council would have to approve the language of the grant before the grant was submitted. In that way, Mike, if there's obligations on the city, the council would have to have approved that obligation.
My question is, what are the deadlines for the grant?
The
You know
submittal
those?
deadline is in January.
January.
January?
Yep.
Okay.
Were you still talking about E then, Barb? On the action item?
Yes, the
1331?
resolution.
Yeah.
Right. Mhm. So the resolution, she has added language, proposed language with her motion.
And you've seconded.
We have a motion and a second to accept resolution
To
1331,
add this language first.
to add the language first, all right? I didn't know if we could do it
I don't
as
know if we
amended.
can do it.
Can we do it as amended, or do we have to do two separate motions?
Do we have the original motion?
Up to the chair. Because no parent motion was made prior, I believe it's up to you whether or not you want to accept an amendment with the parent motion.
We should have made the original motion and the amendment.
I think it's all right to propose the amendment. If the amendment passes, then we can pass the resolution with the amendment.
Well, we're just doing backwards, that's all.
We'll do it backwards since we have a motion on the table. All right. We'll vote on the proposed amendment to the resolution.
Just the amendment?
Yep.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes?
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Now I make a motion to adopt resolution 13-31 as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll vote.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes?
Killian,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Steiner, excuse me, Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item is the agreement between Southwest Regional Planning Commission and the City of Platteville for the Innovation Center grant application. Larry?
Yes, this is the actual contract with regional planning. So first step was agreeing to do it, and the second step is actually signing or agreeing to the contract.
Agreeing to pay to do it.
Agreeing, yes. So this is the agreement or the contract between the City of Platteville and Regional Planning Commission to do the grant application.
I have a question, and I know that there are people from the university in the audience tonight. If we sign a contract with Southwest Regional Planning, does this presume that UW Platteville will, will accept our resolution.
Yes.
And if they don't, I mean, you know, which comes first here, the chicken or the egg? So do we have do we have paperwork with the university that says,
Before I sign the contract, I will make sure I have paperwork suggesting that they would compensate us or reimburse us for our expense.
At this point, it's just verbal then, Larry.
Yes, it is. It's not real hard to get an email or communication though in writing. I can do that.
And the recommendation is to direct staff to work with UW Platteville for collection of their half of application costs, so that is in the recommendation.
and I note that the additional monies that are going to be necessary would come from fund balance?
Oh, from the city's payment? Yes, we are recommending a budget change to take the funds out of the fund balance.
And have we expended all the monies that were left from the assessors? And how about from the finance director?
No,
Pardon?
the finance director, monies are not all spent, no.
The finance director monies are not all spent. And would there be $37.50 in the finance director's?
Yes.
Then, I would propose, I don't know how we do that, but I think that that should be changed to come from the finance director leftover
Okay.
money rather than fund balance.
I think you can just make that part of your motion. It will still require a 2/3 vote
I
for
understand that.
budget change.
So I make a motion to adopt this agreement between the City of Platteville and Southwest Regional Planning Commission to contract for an EDA grant at the total cost of $7,500 with the understanding that half of that money will come from the university and the other half the money will come from monies left with the change in the finance director position.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? We'll vote.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item G, University of Wisconsin Platteville Parking Agreement. Howard or Larry, I'm not sure.
Well, I'll take this one.
All right.
We discussed this briefly at our last meeting under the intro and discussion. The city of Platteville had an agreement with UW Platteville for school year 2012-2013. That pilot agreement was for the right to sell parking lot spaces on city streets, College Avenue and Greenwood. That one-year agreement, in staff's mind, was a success, and we're recommending a 3-year agreement. So what you see before you is a 3-year agreement that mirrors the past agreement from last year. We did correct the map as requested by staff, as requested by the city council to extend the College Drive to Sunset. That would mirror the agreement we have with UW Platteville for snow removal. This agreement would generate $20,000 of revenue for the city on an annual basis, as well as half of any citation revenue that is issued, as well as half of any citation revenue that is generated as a result of UW campus police enforcement.
Any
think-
questions? Yep.
I think I asked you once before, Larry, but I can't remember now. When we discussed this, there were no private homes along any of that route, was there? That were affected by,
No, I don't
Okay.
believe there are.
thank you.
And this is a 3-year agreement
Yes.
as proposed.
I have a question. And that deals with a 3-year agreement. Are we to assume that parking permit fees will not increase during that time?
No, I don't think that we're governing that
I
as part of
understand
this
that,
agreement.
but-
So the campus would continue to have the option of increasing fees during this term.
So wouldn't it seem reasonable that if they increase fees, that we should get an increased revenue stream?
I can try to add that to the agreement. I can tell you, through the discussions, it appeared rather unlikely that the community would receive more than 20,000. That any additional revenue, well, quite honestly, I didn't ask about raising fees, so we can certainly go back and ask them to reconsider that, or to consider that.
I think we should.
Okay.
After all, there are streets.
I mean,
Wanna table it?
if the parking fee increase is marginal, then that's one thing, but if there was some huge amount, and I think that right now we've just redone, my understanding is we've just now had, somebody redo Greenwood Avenue again. Is that correct, Howard?
Yes, Iverson did warranty repair work on the
Greenwood.
work that they did last year.
And we also have, my recollection is there are other streets that we need to do in that area, is that correct?
They
Are they
did.
on your CIP?
They did both, they did repair work on both Greenwood and University Plaza,
Right.
so we
Okay,
should
so
be
they
okay
are-
for now,
We should be good.
for a few years.
Yeah, if the increase is marginal, I don't see it.
Ken?
I have a question for Howard. We pay the university some money for maintenance of those streets. That's
Yes.
roughly $4,000, something like that?
About 6,000.
6,000?
It's based on the general transportation aids that the city receives. We have an agreement with them to pay half of the transportation aid pro rata for the length of those streets that they plow.
Thank you. So it's not all complete clear as far as money to the city. Thank you.
Dan, as proposed, extending the additional parking program and approving the attached 3-year agreement. What is the council's wish?
I do have one question on the 20,000, Larry, that we get. Does that go into the general fund?
Yes, it does.
Okay, well, I would move to approve the Platteville parking agreement.
Second to the motion.
Can we add that, Larry, can you find out if we can add that language for an increase? If they have an increase in the cost of those permits, that we also receive it?
Yeah, I can certainly try. I'll ask
That in
them,
our
and,
motion then, don't we, to accept this?
well, if,
Well, you have a motion.
You would have to amend it.
Oh, we have to
if you're
amend it?
looking to approve this tonight, you could approve it conditioned upon the actual request occurring and whatever results we get. Or you could table this. I guess it's entirely up to you.
Well, I've already made a motion.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second.
Yeah, we do. Start over.
And vote for it or against it. So, we'll vote.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
No.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item is adopt the museum task force recommendations.
No, we
Oh,
forgot
I'm
E.
sorry, I forgot the election cost sharing agreement with Grant County. Jan, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. This is a 2-year agreement that we have every election cycle. It just spells out what Grant County pays for in an election and then what the city pays for. Programming costs, ballots, things like that.
Any questions for Jan? A motion is in order.
I move to approve the agreement.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And we'll vote.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, now we're on to adopt the museum task force recommendations. Larry, I guess if you want to comment on this?
I certainly can try. When we started the budget process in 2013, At that time, I had proposed a cut to the museum budget. And the city council, while reviewing the proposed executive budget, requested that the city manager put together a task force to look at trying to find ways to help preserve the museum services. And that task force was put together in late 2012, and they had their first meeting in January 2013. Enclosed in your packet is their final report and recommendations, as well as some background materials that they received and they asked to be presented to the city council. I think that this is an issue that we all need to talk about, and it's been on the agenda for 2 meetings. This will be the 3rd meeting where you'll have an opportunity to take public comment, and I guess all of this is available on our city's website. I really don't know that I should read all 7 recommendations.
Well, if you like, Larry, since I was the council liaison to the task force, I can start. I have a long list here, so I've got it written down. I don't want to forget anything. I was the Common Council liaison to the Museum Task Force, and I'm sure Larry chose me because he knows how involved I am in the city, particularly in the arts and culture enterprises. And I'm urging you to vote to accept the 7 recommendations of the Museum Task Force. We realize that this is an adjustment, and implementation of these recommendations will take time. Therefore, the task force recommendations included a 5-year transition time, which we felt was very reasonable. The mission of the task force was simple. The mission was to come up with ideas on how the museums could spend less or depend less on city tax dollars, but maintain the museum operations. And I want you all to understand that this task force has spent many hours starting back on the 3rd of January, discussing the operations of the 2 museums, the Rolla Jameson and the Mining Museums, and in the end, agreeing to the 7 recommendations that you have in your packet. And these 7 recommendations were voted on at our June and final meeting. There was much gathering of facts on the museum's operations and much discussion over the months. Discussion that was thoughtful and sincere and even a little heated at times. But the final recommendations would accomplish what the mission of the task force set out to accomplish, which is to cut back on the museum's dependence of the $250,000 annual operating budget, yet wanting to keep the museums viable. The task force members never intended their mission as being an execution squad. The task force met during different meetings with members of both the museum board and the Jameson Museum Association, where task force members were willing to listen to their suggestions on how to realistically cut back the operation budget and keep the museums going. There were no ideas from these members on how to cut back the museum budgets. Their only suggestion was to do nothing, make no changes at all. To make no changes was not an option that the task force had or was ever able to consider. Changes need to be made. We all know that the 2014 budget is not going to be easy to work on this fall. And you all heard our auditor's report from Johnson and Block a month or 2 back, saying that Platteville relies heavily on shared revenue funds. We received twice the amount of any other city of similar size. And these funds can be cut at any time. We don't have any control over that, and we have to be ready. We have to think ahead and start cutting back. And consider this, a few weeks ago, during a work session of the Common Council, the 2014 CIP budget, that's capital improvement budget, was on the agenda. Members from our fire department were there to ask us for capital improvement funds to do electrical upgrade and to purchase a new generator. The current generator is from 1965. I think it's truly sad that our fire department, which is an essential public safety service, has to beg us for money to purchase very ordinary items while the museum spends $43,000 a year on limited term employees. All along, I was under the impression that the museums had many volunteers to do the work during the summer months. So I ask you, why does our fire department, which can operate with 55 to 60 volunteers constantly, volunteers who are willing to put their safety and their life on the line, and yet our museum spends $43,000 a year on LTEs? And this information, even though I've been on the council for several years, I had no idea that that was the amount spent on seasonal employees at the museum. It's included on the second light item on the budget under other wages. So as we started to delve further into the finances of the museums, this was a surprise. $43,000 going to limited term employees. While I asked the task force members, while I and the task force members recognize that the museums are a gem in the community and add to the uniqueness of Platteville, we cannot, however, continue to hand over $250,000 every year without hesitation and without accountability on how these funds are being spent. My point is that the city has been borrowing money for CIP projects for years, and we're getting close to our loan cap. I think we're going to reach our loan cap in 2015. And yet we still have never hesitated to constantly send $250,000 to our museum. Is this fiscally wise to be borrowing money for necessities like roads and parks, and yet spending without question $250,000 every year on a luxury? And a couple of years ago, the council cut back our hourly employees to a 37-hour work week, which of course cuts back on their salaries. However, this change did not affect any of the museum employees, as they are all salaried. So the museum has not had to take any austerity measures. I ask you to support the task force recommendations. This was a group of people, two of which were members of the Jameson Museum Association for a very long time. They're very familiar with the museum operations and the JMA, what the JMA does. They're huge fans too of the museum, but they still recognize that there is a financial need to cut back on the museums now. And you know, there, as I said, we had very sincere, thoughtful discussions during our task force meetings, and we came up with these 7 recommendations. We all had to compromise. I had to compromise. There were some in here I did not want. I wasn't crazy about the 5-year transition period. I would have preferred a 3-year, but anyway, we all had to compromise. And yet I'm really proud of what we came up with. And again, I ask you to support the task force recommendations. Now, on Kathy Cobb's comments about the idea to raise the tourism money, the room tax money, to 1%. She had said no one knew about it. These are ideas that the task force put down. They're ideas for the council to approve. I wasn't aware that the task force had to ask anybody's permission in order to give out ideas. And if that's the case, then this new task force that we're starting to talk about, this municipal building, are they going to have to ask permission for every idea that they come up with? It makes things complicated, and it makes too many cooks stirring the pot. That was one idea, and it was one of the 7 recommendations. Again, I ask you to support the task force, because they worked very hard on it.
You're gonna ask for public input?
We have two people who would like to speak on this subject. Does the council care to say anything else, or I can go ahead and ask them to speak
Some
first?
information I'd like to bring out.
Okay, you wanna do that first? Go
Would
ahead.
you like me to do that first?
Sure, go
Okay.
ahead, do that now, and then,
Marilyn Gottschalk was unable to be here tonight because she's out of town. I had some discussion with Marilyn, and we talked about this particular issue. And I think before we get too hasty on this, Eric Fatsinger handed out a really nice bit of information. All the council members got it on 7/23/13. I hope that you all had a chance to read it and go over this, because there were some real differences of opinion on the task force, and it came to a point where he actually resigned, because it was unfortunate of whatever happened. Okay, I'm not privy to that information. But he has a lot of good ideas here, and the recommendations and everything else addressed a lot of the questions that were pointed out. But if you read the paper that Eric has, if anybody wants one, I can give him my copy of it. It explains a whole lot of things. And I think we don't want to be hasty with this. I would like to recommend that we table this tonight and bring it back, do it for 6 weeks. This way, the JMA and the museum board will be able to sit down and look at some other ways to try to find money. I know when Denny Cooley was here, he talked about endowments. Endowments take forever, folks. They don't just happen. That money's not just gonna hop out of the woodwork, okay? Talked about grants that are available. Those grants are out there, but the money's not there, okay? In a lot of cases. They talk about alumni for the mining museum, okay? Well, my recollection is my brother-in-law was one of the last guys to graduate from the mining program. He's been there in the business 30 years. Most of those people are already dead. So I think we should table this, give people a chance, give the museum board and the JMAC some more time to look at other ways to possibly find money. Give them that opportunity. I think that only makes sense. Thank you.
any other council member have a comment they'd like to make before we take public comment?
Well, I do. Your comment about Eric's packet he gave us, he wrote that packet after having only attended. He was at one meeting, and that was the organizational meeting, which, we didn't do all that much other than decided, when we were going to meet and where and how often. He resigned after that one organizational meeting. And, we went on. We had no choice. We had a task before us. We didn't run away from it. We were asked to do this job by the city manager, and we completed that job. And like I said, I think that we did a very good job of coming up with 7 recommendations. As I said, thoughtful, lots of discussion. Learned lots of things that I didn't know before. But yes, I read that packet that Eric gave us. However, he was not at the meetings. He doesn't know what happened. He only knows what happened at the first one. And then he resigned. I think he showed up for one more meeting, but he had already resigned at that point. And as president of the JMA, it seems to me that he did the JMA a disservice. We needed his voice there. We wanted to listen to people from the JMA. And he was the person appointed to be on the task force. But he chose not to be, not to participate anymore. And I think that was not wise thing to do. But we had to move forward. We had decisions to be made, ideas to come up with, creative ideas. And so, yeah, I read what Eric wrote, and I disagreed with a lot of it. We had a simple mission: come up with ideas on how to reduce the dependency of the museum on the city's operating budget. And that's what we did, and I think our ideas are good.
Well, that leads into one of the people who's requested to speak against adopting the Museum Task Force recommendations, and that is Eric Fatzinger. So Eric, if you'd like to come to the microphone. And then the other person who's registered to speak is Frank Evans, and he has indicated he would like to speak for informational purposes only, so Mr. Evans may speak after that. And your name and address, please, Eric.
Good evening. My name's Eric Fatzinger. I reside at 1292 Walnut Dell Road. I'm going to start with my prepared comments, and then I'll respond to some other comments that have been made this evening about the packet I provided. And I'll try to do that all briefly within the 5 minutes I'm allotted. First of all, I would like to recommend that you do not adopt, and I use the word adopt because that's what's on your item agenda, the following recommendations of the task force for the following reasons. One, the agenda posting this item was not posted, or having this item on it for this meeting was not posted for public knowledge until Friday morning at 10 a.m. I've been checking the website every day all last week. It didn't show up until 10 a.m. Friday morning. So we haven't had time to gather public input, particularly in terms of the JMA members and museum board members and other members in the city who might like to be involved in this discussion. Remembering that the museum, at least the Rollo Jameson portion of it, exists today and is funded by the city and the taxpayers of this city because of a referendum that was passed by the members of this city. Over 70% of the people in the city across all wards voted for that action. So I think we ought to have public input on that action. Simply posting the task force recommendations on the city's website, I don't know if the city has the ability to go back and see how many web hits they've had on that particular page, but most folks don't know it's there. There was nothing in the newspaper about it on the days, and no hit to Mr. Prestergaard in the paper, after those meetings occurred, the city council meetings, when the item came up for information. So other than phone calls from members like myself to other JMA members and other people concerned in the city, there has been really no public announcement that this is even on the agenda or on the radar for the city to adopt these recommendations. So I would ask that you at least delay this for a time until we can get public input on it. Much as we did a year ago with the ability or the issue of combining museum board and other boards across the city, there was a huge amount of public discussion on that, but primarily because there was time to have that discussion. So we were able to get people out on both sides of the issue to come talk about it. I would ask for that same kind of an action to be taken on this. Secondly, there are factual errors and omissions in both the city manager's report, which he attached to the city museum task force recommendations packet that went to you. He did fail to note that I was a member of the task force, but that I did resign shortly thereafter. If you were to read the recommendations packet that was turned in, you wouldn't know that I resigned from that position, that I was simply that I was a member of the task force. And it could be assumed that I voted for it based on the fact there's nothing in it that says I resigned. Second, he states that there was a staff recommendation to accept and approve the recommendations that were attached. Staff was never approached on this. Museum staff, I've spoken to each of them individually, personally, were never asked for their opinions on the recommendations or the viability of those recommendations based on their knowledge of the museum's operations. For the task force to come up with recommendations, the city manager to then pass that on and say that this is a staff recommendation to accept those recommendations, I think is inappropriate, because it's not a staff recommendation in that packet. It was the city manager's recommendation. Staff was not approached. The task force recommendation also, and the report itself, mentions that museum staff has not worked with the Southwest Wisconsin Room staff on their archival ability and on displays, etc. That simply is not true. The Southwest Wisconsin staff, the director of the Southwest Wisconsin Room, has been approached and has been worked with numerous times over the last several years. In fact, just in the 2 years I've been home after retiring, we've worked with them on several occasions in terms of ideas for working with them on material that we're now using currently in some of the new exhibits that were put up in the last year came directly from the Southwest Wisconsin Room after working with their archivist for that information. So that's a factual misstatement as well. Additionally, the task force recommendations in the report indicate that the museum staff has not utilized the PACE program at the university or other university funding programs. That also is not true. Work study students have been working at the museum for years. Some of those years have been pretty lean in terms of the availability of workforce from the students, but they have used that program in the past. There is currently a PACE program student working at the museum and has been for several months. Don't know where they got their information from, but again, it's a factual misstatement that we have not used the PACE program or other university-funded work study programs. Finally, these recommendations rely almost exclusively on the creation of a new 501(c) nonprofit, and that they would have the ability, in the space of 1 year, to come up with the staff and funding to operate the museums, and I'm not convinced that's a viable operation or a viable alternative. Members of the Common Council have a lot of experience with Southwest Fund, a community fund of Southwest Wisconsin, understand, as Mr. Den stated, that those things don't happen overnight. Raising money for things like the Platteville Scholarship Fund has been an ongoing process for several years, yet they don't have nearly the amount of money that would take to run the museums, even with a stipend from the city at the levels proposed by the task force. Simply not viable. If we want to shutter the museum, this is a good pathway to do that. It's a slippery slope. Once the museum starts to shutter for parts of the year, people start seeing that it's closed, they don't come back. And you can't restart a program once it's gone away. So there are many challenges involved with standing up a new 501(c). So in summary, I would ask that you wait until we get a chance to have some public input on this and see what the prevailing public opinion is in terms of the museums, and allow that process to work through either public hearings or work sessions. Finally, I will react to a couple of statements made tonight about my involvement in the museum task force. I was there for the first night, and I made it clear that I had reservations about the mission that task force was being assigned from the city manager based on my understanding of what had been asked for and from the notes I took at the meeting at the Platteville Police Department when we were talking about combining the museum boards, the budget issues, et cetera, and zeroing out the museum's budget a year ago. The task force mission that was given to the task force in the letter from the city manager was not what I had heard being discussed by members of this council. I raised that concern and said I would like to participate anyway, and I agreed to participate. Part of that recommendation and direction from the city manager was to put together a plan to guide a transition that moves the museum from a city expense to a budget neutral position or a separate entity. Nowhere there does it discuss looking at options for what is the right thing for the museum and the city going forward in terms of a time of tight budgets and fiscal constraints. Understood that. We started rather from an open-ended discussion of what's the right thing to do in terms of setting up a 501(c), transferring power to the JMA or cost to the JMA if that's viable. We started with an end state already stated to us and went from there forward looking for a way to reduce the museum and cut the museum out of the city budget eventually. In response to the comments made about not being there, I did not resign until April 9th after a series of emails, which was part of the packet I provided you. I did, in fact, attend the first meeting. I received all the emails of the agenda items and the discussion items. I spoke with several members of the task force throughout the time that they were there, before and after I resigned in April. So I was hearing all of the discussion that needed to be heard. In terms of open and frank discussions, there wasn't a lot of that. If there were dissenting opinions from what the city manager had put down in terms of the task force mission, those were pretty much shouted down and told they wasn't part of the mission, therefore we're not going to discuss it. At that point, I believed as the president of the Jameson Association that it was inappropriate for me to be part of a task force that's mission seemed to be to kill the museum. That may not be the stated intent, but that will be the end result if these task force recommendations are approved the way they are. I believe, and that's my opinion. I certainly understand that's not everybody's opinion. So I guess my bottom line is I request that you take a deep breath as Mr. Dent has proposed, step back, look at some of these factual areas and try to get to the heart of what the answers are for some of these things that may not be clearly understood in terms of how the staff works and the mission runs. And one other thing that just strikes me as odd is that the museum staff is hourly staff. The curator and the education coordinator are not salaried. They did, in fact, pay the price when the rest of the city employees also lost hours. They also lost those same hours. So 2/3 of the museum's full-time staff did take those cuts and did pay that price. So I think it's unfair to say that they didn't, as was stated previously tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Evans? Is asked to speak for informational purposes only. If you would give your name and your address, please.
My name is Frank Evans. My residence is 150 Roundtree Avenue. My mailing address is Post Office Box 425 in Platteville. And actually, Mr. Fatzinger has given a lot of information that I was both hoping to learn. And the only point I want to emphasize really is the recommendation to back off a step, and also the instead of adopt the recommendations, the council can accept the report. Accept means that yes, we've got it in hand. Adopt says we are implementing, as I understand the word. And I am concerned about that word because I don't think that there's been time to think about the recommendations. I didn't know about this point coming up until really a couple of days ago. And I don't think most of the people in Platteville have a clue that this is going on. And I believe that they should have at least a chance to speak. And with that, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Another person is asked to speak in favor of adopting the Museum Task Force recommendation. John Miller.
John Miller, 930 Jewett Circle in Platteville. I'd like the council to get down to the brass tacks of what we're talking about. It's money. It's about the budget. Eric can bring up 300 people to say this is not right. Eric has come to our meetings and said it was approved by a referendum that the city taxpayers are going to pay this money. Now let's have the city taxpayers come forward and give their opinion. If the council wants to do that, I would recommend another referendum because I believe the taxpayers will not vote to pay $250,000 a year to support the museum. I tried to tell Eric, I don't think he wants that. He's all in favor of it, and I would be also. But at any time, for 33 years, the referendum has supported the JMA. I think it's terrible that the JMA president hasn't even thanked the council or the city taxpayers for their support for 33 years. All he wants to do is badger the task force who did their job, who came forward and tried to find out a solution to help the city taxpayers in the budgeting. In the whole staffing, or a couple of things that Eric had talked about before and came forth on the commissions, that you couldn't eliminate the museum board or the JMA board. Under the trust agreement that the city agreed to in 1980, on Article 10, which is the last one, the city, by a majority vote, can discontinue being the trustee of the trust. And only 4 of you have to vote, and the museum would not exist, and they wouldn't have any money. So there could be 4 council people at any time come forward and say, we aren't supporting this at all, and the JMA has to move all of their material from our city buildings. We didn't want to do that as a task force. We tried to say, that's not the right scale, that's not the right way. We're looking how to support this going forward and in the future. You guys have 4 pages, 18 other museums in the state of Wisconsin who do not receive 100% financing. The top 2 museums only receive 50% financing from any city entity. So at least look at cutting to go to a 50% entity for the taxpayers of the city of Platteville. We believe the museum is a good entity to have with us, and our recommendations are to make it a private organization by saying the Historical Society can run it. Historical Society can say we're a nonprofit. We want money to help support it. More people will come. And what I, on a personal level, found from going through the task force, I feel what is needed at the museum is new goals, a new vision, and a new, brighter outlook. I think they have to change the philosophy or the thinking that's in there now, because they have done the same things for the last 33 years. And you need to have something new, and that's why we had recommended going with the Historical Society, get a new board of directors, get that board of directors to take the museum in a different direction, and we realize it's going to take 5 years. I never wanted to give one penny, $0, to keeping the museum open. We compromised, or I compromised, saying it's a 5-year plan. You guys vote to this today and you adopt it tonight, they don't even have to worry about a budget coming up next year. You already approved $250,000. That's not even cutting anything. They're automatically going to get that. I don't know what they're complaining about. The following year, it's $175,000. If there's staff that leave, staff that retire, that's going to compensate for that. So I'd like you to consider it and think about it, and I hope you adopt this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
One thing with the museum and the GMA, when this thing came together, it was never set up to be a moneymaker or to, finance anything else. It was done for education. And it was done very well. We have all kinds of kids that go there. There's a lot of things they have to learn, and it's very essential for the city of Platteville. With that being in mind, times have changed, so money issues become worse each time. It's one of those things, but that's why I would like to see that we table this motion for 6 weeks, giving the JMA and the museum board more time to look at other options of ways of generating money and looking at putting this whole thing together so it can all work. But to jump into this thing tonight without any public opinion to speak of, I think is too hasty. Thank you.
Well, it's been an information discussion twice on the city agenda. Normally, we only put items on information discussion once and then they move to action because we knew that this was going to be big changes for the museum. I was a part of the team, along with Larry and Eileen, to set up the agenda since I'm president pro tem, and I, no problem, agreed to a second time for this issue to be on the agenda under information discussion. And I mean, the museum board, the JMA, the museum staff, they knew that the task force was meeting. They knew that we started in January. I don't see why this would be a surprise to people that we would come forward with our final decisions, our final recommendations. It has not been a secret. It's been on the agenda twice already, so this is the third time. And going back to Mike's comment on education, it can still be, the museums can still be for educational purposes. I don't see why that would change just because you're changing it to a 501c3. And again, like John said, the budget's still going to be $250,000 for next year. And then the following 2 years will be $175,000. That's still a huge amount of dollar support for our museums. Again, that's why we allowed the 5-year transition time, and I feel that was very fair. And the person who made the motion at our final meeting was a longtime JMA member, Craig Trongard. And as far as that referendum that Eric was talking about, I think it was a long time ago, back in the 80s. Times change. And fiscal pictures change a lot too. And it certainly has, not only in the nation, but certainly in the state of Wisconsin. And I talked about shared revenue before. Well, shared revenue has been cut back, I think, 3 times in the past decade. I read recently that we are actually back to 1990 levels for shared revenue. So we have to be ready for cuts because I have a feeling that they're coming from the state. And this city, Platteville, relies heavily on shared revenue and state aid. And we don't have any control over that money. And I still say that the task force worked hard, and a lot of conversation, discussion, ideas were tossed around. Something that Eric missed because he wasn't there. Sure, he read a couple of emails about what happened, but he wasn't there. He didn't hear all of our discussion. He didn't hear our ideas. He didn't hear how a lot of us had to compromise on some of our ideas. Again, you have a new task force forming. And I'm not sure that those members, if they hear that that the Common Council is going to put off and put off and put off recommendations that they spent so much time on. I mean, I didn't miss one meeting. I did not miss the site visit we did to Mount Horeb, which took probably 4 or 5 hours. This was a lot of time involved for our task members, and now you want to put it off. We've already done all our homework, we've done all our research, we've done a lot of talking to people. It's completed, we've done it. And now it's time to move forward and accept the recommendations.
I would like to speak a little. I have no problem accepting the Museum Task Force's report. I have listened tonight, and I think it would be premature to adopt all 7 recommendations. I believe that, in fact, these recommendations, I have no doubt that the task force worked very diligently on these. Some of these are more difficult to implement than others. Some of them take more discussion than others. And so I have no problem accepting the report, but I do have a problem adopting the 7 recommendations at a meeting tonight. I believe that most tasks take a working group. And it would seem to me like a logical next step would be to put together a working group to look now at how these recommendations might be implemented. The timeline they might be implemented on, the way that could unfold. Seems to me that that would include people from the museum board, it would include people from the JMA, it might include, there's been talk in some places about how does the Grant County Historical Society play into this. There's something in here about the Wisconsin Historical Society. We've heard tonight from the Tourism Commission, the city's tourism committee probably needs to take a look at some of this, so it seems to me.
If I may interrupt, I would like to say, yes, Deb Jenny did give me a call and specifically said that, please have the Tourism Commission committee have an opportunity to discuss this. They had not had a chance to talk about it at all.
Well, that's what the task force
So it seems to me then that I have no problem accepting the report. I do have a problem adopting the recommendations, but I would ask that the council president then work with the city manager to put together a working group that would look at how these might be implemented, on what kind of timeline. Maybe some of this is unrealistic, maybe some of it can be done faster, who knows? But until somebody actually works on these recommendations, all they are ideas. And I'm not saying they're good ideas or bad ideas. I'm just saying that, yes, you did a lot of work on them, and they deserve to be thoroughly looked at for implementation on how that might unfold. So I will make a motion to accept the report and to thank the task force for its work.
I'll second
Not
that.
to adopt the recommendations, but to move forward with a working group.
Well, I have one more question, because we have 2 members here from the museum board are you folks interested in speaking? Clay or Bill?
They need to fill out the form,
Okay.
Barb, if they
No, I
did
can't
want to
hear you.
speak, and
Okay.
evidently did not care to speak. We'll take a break here for the phone call. All right, so, again,
I thought for
they
sure
would have
I
had the
should.
opportunity to fill this out, Barb, so, and some people like to come and listen to the discussion and not speak in front of the microphone, so I understand that. All right, so we have a motion to accept
And a second.
the report and to move forward with a working group to look at implementing possible adoption, okay, of some of the recommendations.
Or all.
Or all,
What now?
okay.
'Cause
We have a second.
Is there gonna be a timeline on this working group?
I apologize, I thought I had this thing shut
That was
off.
not in the motion, but I think that obviously.
Because
unless-
they've already put numerous hours. I just don't want it to extend more than a few weeks.
Well, I think that, that could be done. I won't guarantee that we could get it, maybe started before the end of the year, but, you know, definitely.
Before the end of the year?
Before the end of the year?
Okay, I
Hopefully
understood this
no.
had to be done by the time we were ready for budget discussions.
Why?
Why?
No, for
Well, the
2000
budget is 250,000 for this year, so we have a
It's already
year
there anyway.
to do it.
I will certainly work with Larry to start something as soon as possible. I would say that, Patrice. I just know that we have, as a council, a lot of things coming up between now and the end of the year, so. But I think the more important thing is to say that this is a task force recommendations. They need to be seriously considered and looked at, and that's what this motion would ask for. So.
Well, I want to put it on the record that this report was on the museum agenda minimum July 17th. So it was discussed at the museum board on July 17th. So I just want that in the record.
Okay,
So it was available for review.
duly noted. We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Then
I
we'll
think
vote
it's
on-
very
I'm
important
sorry.
that we get more input from the public on this whole situation. And my first item that I wrote down here was to receive the report. I'm willing to go along with the word accept, but I certainly don't want the word adopt. So we have a motion that says receive.
To accept. To accept. the
Accept.
report. Yes, okay. Seeing no further discussion, we will vote on the motion.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Bonin,
No.
Killian,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Steiner,
No.
Den,
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the task force. We will take a look at your recommendations. Next item, information and discussion. The first item is ordinance amending the official traffic map, installation, no parking, taxi stand. Howard?
This is one of the items that was discussed regarding our alcohol task force and discussions, looking at putting a taxi stand on Second Street so that if people have too much to drink, they can easily find a taxi to take them home, and so that we minimize the deleterious effects of alcohol.
Delirious.
Yes. Moving along. Maybe I should have a
undesirable.
little- What?
Undesirable.
The undesirable, yes.
Howard, do you
What-
need a taxi?
Maybe. Okay, one of the issues that we need to look at right now is Platteville Shared Ride and other licensed taxi services would be authorized to use stalls during this time period. Just so that you understand, the Platteville Shared Ride has not been authorized extended hours as of this time. It would require a public hearing and approval from the common council or other bodies to fund the local share. My initial estimate was a little over $6,000 for this semester. If the city agrees to fund this additional local share and proceed with the additional hours, then Platteville Shared Ride Taxi would be one of those that could use that taxi stand.
Questions?
Yeah,
I
how
have a
many other
question.
taxis, licensed taxis do we have?
There's Platteville Cab Service, and I don't know who else.
The only two. Those are the only two.
Those are the only two at this point in time.
Yeah.
And
sorry,
how
Jan,
about things like the, I don't know, there's
John Utley's.
I don't know, there's another one that operates out of Lancaster, I think.
I believe you might be that might be called Safe Ride.
Safe Ride.
That, or Road Crew or something along those lines. I'm not familiar with all of their operations, but because they're based out of Lancaster or wherever they're based out
Keeler,
of,
I hear now.
or Keeler or wherever, I'm not sure whether under our ordinance they would be required to obtain a license to operate in Platteville or not. That's something that staff would have to look at and make a recommendation to the Common Council. I know that the shared ride taxi and Platteville Cab Service are based here in Platteville and are licensed here. I don't know about that other one.
So are you saying that if I happened to be, let's just say I was from Madison and I decided, not that I would ever do this, but to call a taxi from Madison to come pick me up, that taxi couldn't stop at that taxi stand? So it wouldn't be for any taxi? It would have to be a licensed taxi? Or if I called for a taxi from Dubuque, they couldn't stop there?
I'm suggesting that it be for a licensed taxi, whether it's licensed by the city of Platteville or whether it's licensed by the city of Dubuque. I'm not sure, that would be that would be up to you whether you would restrict it even further to say licensed by the city of Platteville. If that's what you want, I can look at amending the ordinance accordingly.
We got a meeting on that tomorrow.
Okay?
Ken?
Okay, my question is, it reads in here that the local share will be $6,060. Does that mean that we are paying half of something, or some portion of something, or is this the total cost, $6,060 for 15 weeks?
That's my initial estimate of the local share. What I'm saying is that normally the Platteville shared ride taxi, the city has a contract with them to fund a certain dollar amount per hour for their operation. What you do is you deduct the fare revenues from that, and that is the deficit in their operation. Normally, under the grant process, the federal and state put in a portion of that deficit, approximately 50% of that deficit, and then the city puts in the remainder as the local share. When I had initially looked at this staff report, I assumed that the federal and state share might be there. The federal and state share will not be there, so the actual cost to do this would be over $8,000. That's assuming that we get roughly the same amount of revenues. If we get fewer revenues, the local share might be a little bit higher, but it's not going to be significantly different. There will be no federal or state subsidy during this calendar year, so the only question is, if we decide to do this, who's going to pay that subsidy?
Yes, Ken.
My next question is, where it's a recommendation, I think the local establishments should help fund part of this cost as well.
That's entirely up to you.
What
If
can be done
you-
about that? That's something that,
How would you like to charge them?
pardon?
I said, how would you like to charge them?
I leave it up to you to come up with a plan.
I have a question.
I think we need to do it, but we're paying for their benefit.
Discussion.
They're getting the benefit, and in general, we get some of the detriments, period.
Barb?
Is this not actually two discussion items? One discussion item is, are we gonna have a taxi stand or not on two places on Second Street? To me, that is absolutely not in any way related to, or doesn't have to be related to, the Platteville shared ride. I mean, it's either, are we gonna have a designated place for people to pick up people who may have overconsumed or not? And I don't see that that has a one-to-one relationship with, we need to extend the hours of the Platteville shared ride taxi. I just don't see that there's a one-to-one relationship there. I do.
Who do you think is gonna come down and pick them up? Their
Pardon?
friends?
Well, there's another taxi in Platteville.
Well, yes, there's another one, they could do it.
Right.
Are you talking about private individuals coming to the taxi stand and picking up people?
Not necessarily, but I'm just saying that it doesn't necessarily mean you have to extend the hours of one taxi service just because you create a taxi stand.
The recommendation was to approve the ordinance that would change the signage for the taxi stand.
So it's just to put in a taxi stand.
Sign.
Yes.
And you're saying two because you were talking about two services, but maybe we don't need two. Maybe we could just start with one. Because I don't think it's supposed to just sit there all night either. I don't think it's a parking place for a taxi. It's a place for a taxi to pick up people, right?
It's not like at O'Hara when you pick your spot and you sit there waiting to hook a ride. It's to come pick somebody up that wants you. So I agree. It doesn't, taxi doesn't need to sit there all night. They can pick up and move on.
Are you suggesting you'd like to add a time limit to the sign, to the restrictions?
You have it
No,
on there.
no. We're-
Okay.
Our point is, if the resolution just says we're gonna make
Yes.
a taxi stand spot.
Yes.
Period. That's all it
In the
says.
simplest form, from 9 PM to 3 AM, it's a taxi stand.
No parking, taxi only.
Yep. So
Simple.
if you have other ideas, you're welcome to throw them in, but that's what's
That-
proposed.
No, that's fine.
I do have a question on the shared ride. I understand that, the fee that the shared ride charges, Howard, is that set by contract when we sign the contract with the current provider?
Fees are established through a public hearing process. The city can establish public, or, fees for taxi service. And you could in fact establish a different fee for a night differential or something along those lines. It would, in order for it to be, in order for us to receive federal and state subsidy, we'd have to go through the public hearing process and get it, they would have to concur with it. But, that's all done locally here.
I see that you have in your comments, staff recommends the city agree, and then proceed with the additional hours in a public hearing. So we would have to do a public hearing anyway to increase the hours?
Yes,
Okay.
as Councilmember Dawes said, this is probably better as two actions.
Yep. But what I was thinking was, yes, if indeed the fee could be increased for those hours of service, if the shared ride, contract could be altered in that respect. Because
Yes.
it's, what does it cost to ride the taxi?
$275.
$275, so.
Is there a mileage thing on it?
Only if you're going outside the city limits.
Staff will be bringing forward a public hearing and a recommendation to extend the hours at a later council meeting.
So, looking at the ordinance amending the official traffic map, it's proposed to have two stalls, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this is on for information and discussion, so I guess if, the council has an opinion now on whether or not they want one versus two, then staff could also be advised of that.
Are they gonna be, if you're looking at two, do you want them right beside each, or adjacent to each other, or are they in different locations?
East and west side.
One on each side of the street, one on the east side and one on the west side.
Of Second Street.
of Second Street.
And Melio, and I see letters to Melio's and to the VFW.
Yes.
And have you heard from either of these?
I spoke with the operator at the VFW, and she had mentioned that they had agreements with individuals to use their parking area in front of the VFW, the Mineral Street side there, for late night pickups at that location. So, if you want to continue to allow that to happen instead of using this, that's the direction that I would need from you.
That one's in,
So, the VFW operator has indicated that they're allowing people to stop there and pick up, I'm
Yes.
having, so,
it's in the handicap stall. Is where they're letting.
okay. So there is kind of a taxi stand.
The taxi stand is on private property.
On private property.
It's preferred to have it on public property so that all taxis are treated the same and are allowed to use it freely. If you do it on private property, that discretion goes to the property owner.
Well, I think we should have a taxi stand, but I would be in favor of starting with one spot instead of two.
Duly noted. Any other comments for information and discussion? All right, we're gonna move on to the resolution authorizing submission of a community development block grant application for the library block redevelopment.
In an effort to save time, I'll simply state that we reviewed this earlier in the evening. It's the actual resolution to apply for the grant.
And it'll come up for action next time. Resolution amending the City of Platteville's employee handbook regarding employee benefits, group medical insurance.
The staff note is rather long. I'll try to summarize this. One of the goals that I've had is to try to involve staff in making policy and to bring ideas forward. One of the ideas that has come out of the Health Insurance Committee, out of the staffing level, is to look at the resolution enclosed in your packet. Basically, we want to offer a stipend to other employees so that if they choose not to take the health insurance offered by the City of Platteville, that they do receive a different benefit in compensation, albeit much less of a benefit. Some employees have spouses who also have insurance offered, and if we can encourage employees to switch from the city-sponsored policy to their spouse's sponsored policy, the city is in a position to save quite a bit of money, approximately $1,200 a month per person. So this is something that our staff committee is coming forward with. And after reading the staff note and the resolution, if anybody has any questions, I can.
Larry, I have one quick one here. If the city has a health insurance policy, okay, you pay a flat fee for that, all right? Is that correct, for that policy?
Well, we pay on a per person, per employee basis. And you can get a family plan, you can get a single plus one plan, or you can get just a single plan.
Okay, so you don't have a blanket, just a policy that covers employees, whether you have 10 or 200, the premium's the same, it's not.
Set on a per employee basis,
Okay.
yeah.
I know other businesses that do have a similar situation like this, and what they have done is when the people opt not to be in that program anymore, and if the city does pay for that, where they would normally pay for some of their employees to have that, then they compensated those employees with the dollar difference in their payroll.
Okay, that's not what's being proposed.
I know, but I'm saying that's one of the options.
You certainly could. Instead of the 200 being proposed, you could do 1,200 or the value of their policy.
Well, it's based in a monthly, this particular organization does it, it's so much per month in your check.
Same here.
Okay.
That's
If you don't
what's
take-
being proposed.
If you don't take their insurance.
That's what's being proposed here as well.
Okay.
I believe the request, or the proposal is 200 per month. But they have to go, if you quit taking city insurance September 15th, You have to complete a full month before you can begin receiving the stipend.
I have two or three questions. I realize, and first of all, I appreciate the fact that the employees are attempting to try to come up with ideas. So this is not to stifle that. But I would have a question as to whether or not this has been discussed with any people who do insurance consulting or are insurers.
Tricor is a member of our organization,
Okay.
of the staff committee.
Because I would want to hear, certainly, group health insurance is based on, premiums for group health insurance are based on experience, a group's experience.
Mhm.
And the smaller you make the group, sometimes, the more difficult it is to spread that out, because,
We've discussed that.
And so I would want to hear from a health insurer as to the likely effect of removing people from the group and its potential to increase the premium. I mean, just because people go out of the group does not necessarily mean the premium will change or in fact, premiums could go up significantly.
Premiums will go up every year.
If people leave a group. But I mean, they can go
Yeah.
up because of escalating costs, but they can also go up because of decreasing size of group and the experience of the people within the group. The other question I have,
Okay, I'll wait.
second question I have is, and you can bring this back, there are some and this I think you would need to check with an employment attorney. Because there are some employers, and there are some policies, and my sister has this, that the person whose birthday comes first in the year must, I mean, the way the language is written, there's not a choice as to which person has to take the insurance. If it's a married couple, the person whose birthday comes first in the year, it's their employer that has to pay. And so and there are other of these kind of rules. So I would like an employment attorney's opinion based on this, because there may be some employees that would suffer some kind of, they might call it discrimination, because they aren't able to take part in this because of the way this language is written in other
Do you have an example of a situation where that occurs with an employer that I could research?
I will give you one.
I can get,
Okay.
I can give you one.
Yeah.
We have several
right now?
employers in the region that do offer the stipend that are public employers, so I suspect that there is a way to address that.
Right, but I would want to make sure that is addressed,
Yep.
because I don't want us ending up down the road with a legal situation based on the fact that somebody, not by virtue of our attempt to discriminate, but feels discriminated against because of other rules.
Right. Brent Straka of Tricor Insurance has been meeting with the staff committee on a regular basis. And he did discuss with the group the idea of the number of employees that participate in the group. We are well above the threshold that our insurance could go up if the group gets too small. And we still have significant flexibility before we get to become too small. So that issue has been discussed with the staff committee, but I will ask Brent to come to our next council meeting and see if he's available that evening to talk to the city council, answer your questions.
There, an example, I'll give you one real quick, right, that you asked about. John Deere insurance, okay? If my spouse was supplied insurance by her employer, then we have to use that employer's insurance first.
Yeah,
Okay.
every employer should do that, right?
If she has to pay portion of it, then she doesn't have to use their insurance at all, and she's strictly on John Deere.
See, now, we're gonna run into a situation where every company has their own policy, and for me to analyze every single company's policy in comparison to ours is gonna be rather difficult. But Barb's question was specific, and I think I can find an answer to that.
But my question really said, have we involved our employee attorney, our attorney that deals with employees and employee issues, so that we're sure that we're legally okay. I mean, you're right, you can't research every situation, and this has been dealt with before.
Yeah.
But it needs to be dealt with from a legal standpoint so that we get it correct.
And Larry, when you said your comment about we're well above the threshold in terms of number of employees, you know, and that it therefore should not negatively impact our group insurance rate, that raises a question in my mind, and then at what point and where in the ordinance would it say that we've reached our level, and even though you qualify, we will not agree to
Right.
have you drop off the city insurance or not take the city insurance? That raises that question for me.
That's a good question for Brent. I can't answer that. I think if people were dropping the city insurance to that extent, which I don't expect, the cost savings of someone dropping the insurance would probably make up for the increases that we experience as a result of that. If you're gonna save $1,200 a month, it's gonna cover the increase that, well, you're saving at least $1,000 a month.
Well, I
So-
think the question for me becomes, at what point does that group rate increase so much that the savings become smaller and smaller?
It would be up to every individual to check their own insurance with their spouse, not, you wouldn't have to do that kind of thing. It'd be their responsibility to do that.
As per your request, I will have Attorney Quorum draft a legal opinion, and then I will ask Brent from Tricor to attend our next meeting.
And I also have the issue about the $200. The $200, I am assuming, is not added to base salary.
Dwayne, we researched that. Can you confirm how that is handled?
It's considered a wage. It's not added to the base salary, but it is considered a wage.
I understand, but I would want it to be kept separate, because
Right.
I don't think that any,
Right, it's considered a fringe benefit, but
any-
it's taxable as a wage, yes.
it may be taxable as a wage in terms of, I see you say, somebody would have to pay social security on it.
Right.
But it should not be part of the wage that if somebody is given a 2% or a 4% or a 9% increase, that it is figured into that amount of money.
Right, it's not part of their base wage, no.
The longevity would not be factored in with longevity.
Longevity
There's no
is a thing of the
longevity.
Yeah,
past.
okay, we've had it in the past. I thought we had some that were still on it. Good. All right. Any other questions on this?
Yes. Do you have like an October 1 where people have to make a decision? And then it
Yes.
can't be changed till the next October 1 or something of that nature?
Yes, unless they have a qualifying event or until the window opens again. Yep, it's.
So now this coming October 1, a decision has to be made? These employees?
I don't know that it's defined as October 1. It's defined as the
Just
open
picking a date.
enrollment period. That's letter 7B on the resolution,
It's normally by December 15th, something like that.
December 15th.
Somewhere in that
Okay, so
area.
you have December 15th. Okay.
We want to make sure our employees have health insurance, and if they drop it and something happens, they can get back onto our insurance.
Now, this will be reviewed based on the new Healthcare Reform Act?
We are developing this within that environment.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right.
I will tell you that this health insurance committee has been a learning experience, not only for employees, but also for myself. There's a lot of changes coming in health insurance, and we're gonna be talking about this an awful lot in the next 3 or 4 years. So,
Next item, resolution amending the City of Platteville's employee handbook, employee benefits, employee residency requirements.
this was on our last agenda, and we briefly talked about it, but ultimately we decided it should be on for information and discussion again.
Okay, good.
I thought we decided that we were gonna wait to see what happened with the Milwaukee lawsuit.
No,
That's
no.
what, yes, we did say that.
You said that, I
Yes.
didn't agree to it.
No, that's right,
Oh,
but the rest
Let
of
me
us
look in the
did.
minutes.
I had a question in looking at the information, and I had asked Larry to clarify emergency personnel, because the language refers to under 4A, I think. Under 4B, and then C, a local governmental unit may impose residency requirement on law enforcement, fire, or emergency personnel that requires such personnel to reside within 15 miles. So there's some, I think, a need to clarify on who the emergency personnel is.
When you and I spoke, Eileen, you had asked that I clarify that and put it under letter D. Is that everybody else okay with?
Yep.
I did look it up in the minutes, and it says it should be for information and discussion at the next meeting. Both Steiner and Bonin were in favor of the handbook amendment, and it was discussed. Den and Killian were not in favor. So it was just discussed at our last meeting, and then you asked it for more information.
So we'll be on next time.
Next time I will have letter D on there, and then talk about emergency personnel. Are there any other changes for next time that you would like to see?
All right, resolution authorizing the sale of not to exceed $5 million general obligation securities for the public purpose of refunding 2011 NEMs as well as various projects included in TID 4.
Okay. Due to the current interest rates, the city of Platteville is interested in refunding the city's 2011 note anticipation notes. It has a balloon principal payment due on December of 2015. The city of Platteville is also interested in borrowing approximately $1,020,000 for 2014 improvements to the land being purchased in TIF District Number 6. The total amount of these two loans is approximately, plus issuance expenses is $5 million. The refunding of the 2011 loan will be paid back from the debt service fund, and the improvements to TID District Number 6 will be paid through TIF District Number 4 taxes as per the recent amendments to these two TIDs. We're recommending you authorize the sale of the $5 million worth of general obligation securities.
I have a question, Larry. What is it, approximately about 395 or $3,590,000 or whatever that we need now, but the rest of it doesn't happen till a year from now. So why do we need to borrow it all now? Why not borrow the rest that we need later?
I think when we looked at this, and Dwayne, correct me if I'm wrong, it was the interest rate environment is starting to change. That had that entered into the discussions. I think instead of going to two different bond issues, you're starting to pay two different bond issuance expenses, which means the bond consultant gets paid twice as opposed to once under this proposal. Dwayne, did you have any other ideas as to why we want to do this now?
No, I mean,
got
if
it.
we're planning on borrowing next year also, it could be, that part could be next year, but depends on what.
That's true. We're looking at doing a street project next year, and it's possible that that might make it through the budget process.
But if you're looking at borrowing then, that could also be part of
Yep,
it.
it
So
certainly-
you wouldn't really need to do all that this time.
That's correct.
Well, wouldn't the person that might be best to answer the question of whether we should do all of it or not right now is our bond counsel, who has some idea about what rates may be doing?
Yeah, that's
If
why I
rates
suggested.
are- Yeah, if rates are going up, I mean, but he wouldn't, this is not to exceed 5 million, so he could come back with something that doesn't exceed 4 million. I mean, he doesn't have to borrow, if he believes the environment will be better for the other million next year, he could do it then, right?
Well, that's just it. He doesn't believe that. That's why we're doing it now.
Okay, so he's already issued some type of opinion?
When you say bond counsel, I'm referring to Jeff Belangi, who's the bond
Right.
advisor.
Right,
Okay.
bond, yes, right.
This is the work that he has put together.
Okay.
This isn't something that I've authored. It's something that we've put together as a team, I guess.
Okay.
He's been involved intricately in putting this together.
Okay,
What, can you ask him our question, give him our question, and see
Sure.
what his opinion is?
You bet.
Please do.
Yep.
To borrow separately, I mean.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I have a question about wording. Underneath the impact, it says to take place with some low interest rates. It says that on both of these documents, the 5 million and the 1 million. So what does that mean? We're just gonna get some low rates? Who could tell me that? Dwayne?
Obviously, the shorter the term period, the lower the rates. So the 1-year rate might be 2%, and the 10-year rate might be 3.25. So And what is your perspective of low? So I guess that's just a wording here.
Yeah, short-term loans definitely come in at lower interest rates than longer-term.
Okay, and my understanding of the 4 million is that it will not go against our debt, cap, because there are funds being generated in TIF 6 to pay those notes, and so that would not be the kind of bonding that would go against our
Total debt.
total debt.
I
that
believe it
correct,
will
Larry?
go against their debt, but you're also paying off the 3,900,000 or whatever that amount is.
So it's,
It's not a revenue note. It's a general obligation, so it will
Right.
count against our debt capacity.
but it is counting against it now, because this is
Yes.
just refunding, so it's
Yes.
not new,
Well, 1 million of it is new,
right?
and that's for the stormwater improvements. Yep.
Right.
Other questions?
Had you talked to the people about the land for the new stormwater? That's the one you're talking about, it's the one up by the water tower, right? That, to drain that area?
No, the city bought 39 acres on East Side Road that we're closing on in September.
Oh, okay,
and-
never mind.
Okay.
Thank you. I thought it was a new one.
All right. Hearing no other discussion, we will move on to the next item, which is resolution authorizing a sale not to exceed $1,070,000 general obligation securities for the public purpose of purchasing land. And information in your packet, does anybody have any questions on that? All right,
I have a question. The pond is supposed to cost $385,000. Where's that money to be coming from? TIF?
You're talking about the pond for by L&M? Or by the Rose?
But the one that's
former-
listed in the CIP has $385,000.
That's M&M.
Okay, that is triggered when L&M decides to expand, or when a business expands there and we need the stormwater. At this point, we're only estimating that could occur next year.
So the money will come from TIF?
When it is used, it would, when it is billed. In fact, if the funds that are generated to pay for stormwater improvements on the East Side Road property exceed what is necessary, we could use that funding to help pay for that. I think that was getting into Mike's question a little bit.
Right, you're looking at some of Marsh Harms's property to put that, I think you talked about that, because of the
Well-
drainage area from the water tower,
We've got 3 or 4 options yet. We haven't solidified what's
Oh,
gonna
I
happen.
just meant that was where that
Yep.
came about.
Yeah, if we can do the East Side Road property, then any funds that are left, we would be able to use to front the money. Keep in mind, we would do recapture and get it back from whomever builds out there. This isn't an easy thing to explain, I guess. I hope, if you have questions, definitely.
any other questions? All right. University of Wisconsin Platteville bus stop sign.
Go ahead.
Amy has been waiting patiently to tell us about the bus stops.
Hi again, everybody. On the agenda tonight is approval, well, I think approval. Do they have to actually approve of this?
This is
Discussion.
This is discussion only.
Information.
Ultimately, okay, well, these aren't official ordinances. I'm looking to put up 23 signs across the city at the locations where the bus stops, so that students know where the bus stops are, and also, again, so that the public knows where the bus stops are. I included a draft sign. It's gonna be a little different than the one that made it into your packets, but they're 12 inches in diameter, and again, 23 of them across town. Any questions?
I have a question, probably more for Howard. Because it's gonna be 23 signs and we tried to not have Sign City constantly. Do you know, Howard, could these signs be put onto poles that already exist or have other signs? Or are
Amy
there
and I have looked at it, and in cases where we can, we do in fact intend to put them on existing signs. For example, like the one down here at on 4th Street, just south of Main Street, there's a number of signposts down there, and we've identified one that we would put the sign on, so we wouldn't put a new post in.
And of the 23, do you have to put in new posts on any of them?
We would need to put new posts in some of those locations. I didn't identify the actual number of them, but I'm thinking it's a little over half.
Actually, just a correction there. There's only about 11 places in the city where the signs will go on a municipal street. The other locations will actually be on businesses because the bus stops at businesses. Does 11 sound right, Howard, when we counted it out, I think?
Somewhere along there.
Somewhere around 11. And then of those, about half would need a new post. So we're looking at maybe 5 or 6 new posts. And Howard and I already discussed this, but the cities can submit an invoice to the university to reimburse for the labor and the materials.
That was gonna be my question.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I see that you talked about the one route that wasn't very successful, and I see that you still wanna put a bunch of signs out in that 151 route.
Yeah, we just reduced the number of hours that route runs. It was running 3 days a week, and we're moving it to 1 day a week. So we still want to provide an opportunity for students to get to Walmart, the movie theater, the bowling alley. It's just going to be a 1 day a week instead of 3.
Thank you.
Yep.
Amy, do those businesses have to agree to these signs?
Yeah, I have to go to the businesses still and ask them, but I wanted to hear your okay first, and then I'll start that task. I don't think there will be a lot of resistance because it's pretty good for a business to have a bus come to them, but we might need to negotiate a little on where it's mounted, if anything, probably.
There is one issue with that, though. Those will be taking up parking spots.
Nope, they're not
Up for-
parking. That's why this isn't technically an ordinance, because it's not taking up it's not actually a bus stop. We're just putting a sign up that says the bus stops in this general vicinity wherever there's a spot available, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not
That
a
would be
ticketable
great if
offense
we
then.
had reserved spots, but I'm not about to go there right now.
Good, thank you. It's not a ticketable offense then, if I
No,
thought
it is
that.
not.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and Dick's pointing out a side note, we've got signs to hang up along the Platteville Arboretum Trail as well. They'll be going up in the next month or so. Separate project, but similar.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Eileen.
Petition Calhoun Drive. Not sure who wants to,
The city council had requested that we include this in the packet for discussion purposes.
Because we got a petition from a resident up on Calhoun Drive.
and this came about because the city looked at parking a certain distance from the new residence hall, is that correct?
Right.
All right, so just the background, I don't know if everyone knows the background, maybe Howard or Larry could give a little background on that?
The other one is, we basically drew a circle around the Roundtree Commons, and we established rules and ordinances regarding parking restrictions in that area. Calhoun Drive is one of those areas. The reason why this is coming up now is because the developer in that area just recently paved Calhoun and Minoj Drive for putting up additional lots for development. So prior to now, Calhoun Drive was in name only. Now it's physically there, and so now the people who are out there are asking that the ordinance be changed based on their experience.
Well, I'm puzzled by some of the addresses of the people who signed the petition. They don't live anywhere near Calhoun Drive.
But there's some people that live away for example, on Camilla Court, that park on Calhoun Drive, and they wanted to have it easier as far as parking there. So that's why this is coming.
Okay, but we got people
It's coming
from,
because there's some of them that they meet, like, for example, Monday night, number come from Camilla Court,
oh,
and so they
This
want to
is
be able
Heather
to park
Lane,
on
which is up by-
Calhoun Drive.
the golf course,
Well,
Center Street.
Well, there's
I think this could be
even some
solved
from
by,
out of town, wasn't there?
by simply leaving the permit parking requirement on Ready Drive and remove it from Calhoun and also Camera Court. Those are the two areas that are the issue.
So would then it just be signed no overnight parking?
Prior,
It become covenant parking restriction only on Calhoun and Camera Court.
And I don't know what their
I
covenants.
don't know what that means.
Hmm?
Well, the covenants, the city's not
Please
responsible.
explain.
Yeah,
And
right.
they don't do
I don't
anything
even
to do
know
with
what
the
the
covenant,
covenants
it's just whoever built the.
Covenants, the difference between,
What is the covenant rule then regarding parking?
I think it says no overnight parking.
The
This,
developer
this,
just put that in.
Ready
and
Drive
developed that
says
area.
no parking whatsoever.
Oh, I don't think so.
well, there is a distinction between the city's ordinances, which we have control over. Covenants are done by the property owner
Right.
at the time
Right.
that everything is constructed, and the people buying the properties agree to abide by the covenants. So we do not enforce the covenants. The city does not enforce the covenants. What we're talking about here is simply the city ordinance, which at this time says no parking at any time.
Anytime.
Right. And at least some of the residents would like that city ordinance to be changed. And prior to this change, Howard, did we regulate parking on those streets?
It wasn't
no, not
restricted.
not on Ready Drive. As I said, Calhoun Drive just became paved, so it was never in existence until just recently. But Ready Drive and Camla Court did not have any restrictions prior to the this recent development with Roundtree Commons, in which case they fell under the standard 48-hour ordinance, or as you alluded to, whatever restrictions that the covenants put into place that we don't enforce.
So I think the question would be then, if we bring this up for action, would the city send out notices to the property owners that would be affected, as we did when we were talking about the permitting process, or how would we go about notifying the residents that this is being discussed again?
Take the signs down.
Take the signs down.
Just
Yeah,
take
just
the
take
signs
the signs
down.
down, make no overnight parking, real
You,
simple.
you still have to change the ordinances to enforce the signs. I would recommend that you use the mailing list that we've already established when we put this up, and just send out letters saying that we're looking at removing it.
I just, where my business is, we use Ready Drive for overflow parking. So now, are we gonna say that there's no parking on that street? Or just parking, no overnight parking, or,
Actually, we
Permit
would be
parking.
removing the restriction, as
They-
I understand it.
It is, it's
They just
Calhoun.
requested no overnight parking.
okay,
No.
No?
No.
Oh, I thought that's what they
Says
said
on the back,
in
just
the
no
letter.
overnight parking.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
They have that now. They have no overnight parking now. In addition, they have no parking, period. They're asking for the restriction during the daytime to be removed.
Exactly, and
Okay.
just have no overnight parking.
Yep.
Yeah, that's, okay.
so you can still park during the day is what they're saying.
Yes.
That's what they want.
Okay.
On Calhoun, but I don't know
But-
what the parking regulation is on Ready.
But Ready Drive says no parking anytime.
That's correct.
The whole subdivision says that.
Yeah.
No,
Well, not all of
No,
it?
it's the portion of Ready Drive,
Okay.
not the whole length.
So this is only about Calhoun Drive.
Calhoun.
All right.
So you're saying all my people are in violation of parking on that street?
If the sign says no parking, then they are.
All right, next item. Renaming,
So,
Oh,
Do you want to
that's
give
fine.
some,
I don't have a
some
problem.
direction? Do you want us to draft an ordinance and put it on future agendas, or are you just gonna let this go? I mean, I
what's the will of the council? Do we want this on for action?
Yes.
Yes, and
Yes,
no- and-
because I
and
need
as
some
requested,
clarification.
No overnight parking.
Yeah, exactly.
okay, as requested.
Say again what you're saying?
For Calhoun Drive, as requested, no overnight parking.
Just Calhoun?
Yes, Calhoun.
Yep.
So if we're gonna go into another street Okay, I might have to do something about that.
All right. Is that clear?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Renaming tractor pull area Dale Rupp Memorial Track. We also received a letter, I think somewhere I saw that this evening, relative to this, and asking that if we were to consider renaming the tractor pull area, that we also consider another, suggestion. Tammy and Steve Brogley, and someone has written us a letter asking that that name be considered.
Yeah.
Has the Parks, Forestry and Recreation Committee looked at this?
No, it's coming up Monday night.
Okay, so they will have a recommendation for us before the next council meeting.
Yes. It was introduced at Parks, Forestry, and Recreation, but they will not take official action until Monday, as Ken alluded to. This is just to introduce it to you. We still have at least one person who is involved in this, and you can see there are letters for and against naming it for Mr. Dale Rupp. Based on the allegations in this one letter, I did look, staff did look up Mr. Dale Rupp in Wisconsin court system, and we found nothing that I believe would disqualify him from consideration, just a couple of minor civil actions.
Questions, anyone?
Will this new letter be given to the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Board too?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Last item is an update on the City Hall Task Force Committee. I have presented the information earlier this evening about the individuals who will serve on the task force, and I thank them in advance for doing that. And that I will be contacting them to set up an organizational meeting. That concludes the filmed portion of our meeting. We will go into a work session to discuss the 2014 capital improvement plan, and after that to adjournment. So we'll take a 5-minute break.